For more of this kind of content, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Extinction was the safest assumption. The Council Survey Flotilla entered the system on standard reclamation vectors, instruments already biased toward confirmation rather than discovery. A Class 15 Deathworld squatted at the center, its star flaring with violent irregularity, its inner orbits choked with radiation bands known to shred unshielded hulls in minutes. The planet itself was a catalogue of impossibilities. Surface gravity, above tolerance, atmospheric toxicity off every scale, tectonic instability measured in continuous motion. It had been logged centuries earlier, scanned, marked and sealed with a single annotation. Extinct by environment. 17 survey ships spread out across 3.1 million kilometers. Their commanders relaxed, their task procedural. They were here to verify ruin, extract what remained and move on. No one expected company. The anomaly appeared at 0.8 AU, a mass shadow where none should exist. Sensors resolved it slowly, reluctantly, as if the numbers offended them. A ship. Singular, large. Its hull geometry was blunt, armored in layered plates that reflected little and explained less. No visible energy veins, no ceremonial symmetry. Weapon ports gaped openly along its spine, unapologetic. Laughter rippled. Through the command deck. A survivor artifact, one analyst said, voice light. Or debris with delusions. The ship's transponder identified it as human. The word hung in the air, briefly curious, then absurd. Humans were a footnote, species, recorded only in scattered probes and unverified contact rumors. Any civilization born on a Class 15 world would be chemically simple, technologically stunted, biologically compromised. Survival itself implied primitiveness. Impossible. Long-range scans returned displacement mass at 15 million tons. Power output. Red low, stubbornly flat, without the spikes associated with modern shielding. Internal mapping suggested crude compartments, life sign counts stabilizing at 1904. The number triggered no alarm. Processing quotas adjusted automatically. A senior surveyor flagged the ship's armor cavities as construction flaws. Another counted the kinetic apertures, 39, and labeled them obsolete. The Council's threat algorithm assigned a rating of 0.02. Processing time estimates populated the display. Compliance achieved in under 7 minutes. They widened the scannet. No escorts, no pickets, no traffic wakes. The system was otherwise dead. The human ship held position without drift. Its vector aligned not with the planet, but with the incoming flotilla. Armor square, orientation deliberate. Primitive, the commander concluded, and the classification locked. The flotilla transmitted a reclamation notice, citing environmental extinction statutes and Council salvage authority. It included relocation offers, labor reassignment options, and penalties for non-compliance. The message was long, precise, and delivered with the patient tone reserved for species that did not understand their situation. Processable. A junior technician noted an irregularity in the ship's heat management. Energy bleeding laterally through armor seams rather than venting outward. The observation was logged and ignored. Another flagged the absence of active emissions as suspicious. That, too, was dismissed. Dead systems produced dead designs. The human ship did not answer. It did not maneuver. It did not broadcast distress or greeting. It simply remained, a dense shape against a lethal sky, as if it had always belonged there. At 4 minutes into the encounter, the commander authorized a low-power demonstration strike for instructional effect. Weapons charged without urgency. Across the void, the human vessel's hull remained dark, patient, and very much present. The Council spoke as if ownership were already settled. A formal channel opened, layered with authority markers and archival seals. The voice of the reclamation commander translated into 7 standardized bands. The message cited extinction statutes, environmental forfeiture, and Council salvage rights over Class 15 systems. It explained procedures with practiced patience, disarmament, within 300 seconds, crew census within 600, transfer to labor arbitration thereafter. The tone assumed confusion, not resistance. The human reply arrived before the final clause rendered. Audio only, narrowband, clean. Receipt acknowledged, a voice said, level and unhurried. Your claim is denied. A pause rippled across the survey decks. Denial was not a recognized response. The commander requested clarification, restating authority with added emphasis on numerical disparity. 17 council vessels in system, reinforcements. Queued at the jump limit, one human ship isolated at 0.8 AU. The math was presented as kindness. Those numbers are correct, the human voice replied. Your conclusion is not. Claim denied. The phrase appeared on auxiliary displays as analysts tagged it for anomaly. The commander escalated, invoking historical precedent and environmental mercy clauses. No species had ever been permitted to retain assets in a world rated lethal by council standards. Survival did not confer sovereignty. Survival implied error. The human voice did not argue history. We are established. It's... M said. We are crewed. We are armed. This system is occupied. The commander warned of enforcement. The words were familiar, rehearsed across centuries of uncontested reclamation. Time allowances reappeared, 300, 600, 900, counting down in soft, authoritative increments. We will not comply, the human said, and the countdown halted mid-second as the system struggled to reconcile the sentence. We will not disarm. We will not transfer personnel. Any attempt to board will be treated as hostile action. A junior officer laughed, sharp and brief, before catching themselves. The commander authorized a visual link. The human image resolved. A dim operation space, functional lighting, a single figure centered in frame. No insignia, no ritual. Hands folded behind their back, posture relaxed to the edge of insult. You are alone, the commander said. We are sufficient, the human replied. Alone. Sufficient. The commander shifted to legal framing, citing council jurisdiction over extinct classifications. The human response cut through it. This world was logged extinct without ground confirmation, the voice said. Your error does not bind us. Sensors updated as the human ship transmitted. Its own data packet, timestamps, habitation records, environmental adaptation logs spanning 214 years. The commander dismissed them as fabrications. The voice did not contest the dismissal. Withdraw beyond 1.5 million kilometers, the human said. Power down offensive systems. We will not pursue. And if we refuse, then you will test our boundaries, the human replied. They are not negotiable. The channel remained open. No threats followed. No countdown resumed. The human ship held position. Armor square to the flotilla. Orientation unchanged. Heat curves stayed. Flat. Power output steady. One analyst noted a minor vector correction. 0.2 degrees. Too small to matter. It was logged as drift. We do not kill prisoners, the human added, almost as an afterthought. The channel closed. On the survey decks, the commander authorized a demonstration strike to restore order to the conversation. The weapons teams complied with professional ease. It crossed the void. The human ship waited, having said everything it intended to say. The first volley was meant to educate. Council gunnery doctrine calibrated the strike at 15% output, enough to overwhelm obsolete shielding without destabilizing, and target meant for capture. 3 survey cruisers aligned emitters and released coherent energy lances across 22,000 kilometers of irradiated space. The beams struck the human ship dead center, bathing its hull in blue-white light that flared, bright enough to ghost the sensor arrays. The expected sequence failed to appear. No shield bloom. No harmonic cascade. No hull breach. The energy struck bare armor and vanished into it, bleeding laterally through the seams the council had mocked minutes earlier. Thermal spikes registered across multiple plates, peaked, then flattened in under a second. Radiation backscatter dropped below background noise. The ship's power curve did not fluctuate. No damage. Weapons officers rechecked calibrations. The readings held. Efficiency loss was calculated at 88% absorption, then revised upward as more data arrived. 91%, 92.4. The number stabilized at 93.1 and refused to move. The commander authorized escalation. 6 cruisers fired at 35%, frequency shifted to induce resonance failure in layered materials. The void around the human ship became a glare field, energy saturating every known vulnerability model. Armor plates blackened, external layers sloughed away in controlled ablation, vapor venting cleanly into space. Beneath them, identical plates remained intact, edges sharp, alignment perfect. Internal sensors reported crew life signs steady at 1904. No depressurization. No internal fire. At 50% output, Council emitters began to complain. Containment fields heated beyond safe margins. One cruiser dropped power to vent plasma, its captain filing a damage report that listed target resistance as the cause. The human ship did not respond. It did not maneuver. It did not return fire. It absorbed. "This should have worked!" A senior analyst whispered the words before silencing themselves. The phrase was logged anyway, flagged as emotional deviation. The Sci-Fi commander ordered a focused strike at 70% from the lead cruiser, violating survey safety protocols. The beam hit with enough force to crater small moons. Armor plates glowed, then dimmed. Heat was shunted into internal sinks and radiated, out along channels invisible to Council sensors. The absorption curve dipped briefly to 89%, then climbed back above 92 as adaptive layers adjusted. The human ship transmitted a narrow-band telemetry burst, unencrypted. Impact graphs. Heat dissipation timelines. A single line of text, time-stamped to the first strike. Performance within tolerance. Council silence stretched for 3 seconds, an eternity in combat time. The flotilla's confidence cracked audibly as officers spoke over one another, proposing new frequencies, higher outputs, exotic harmonics never tested against live targets. The commander authorized one final demonstration volley at 80% to end the anomaly. As weapons charged, long-range sensors detected movement, not evasion, approach. The human ship's acceleration curve rose smoothly, passing 4G, then 6, without spike or strain. Distance counters ticked down from 22,000 kilometers to 20,500. "Target is advancing," a technician reported, disbelief edging their voice. The commander dismissed it as desperation. No vessel built for survival on a Deathworld could endure sustained acceleration without tearing its crew apart. The doctrine was clear. The human ship closed another 1,000 kilometers, armor still steaming faintly, power output flat and stubborn. The Council prepared to fire again, clinging to models that insisted superiority would assert itself if only pushed hard enough. They had not yet understood the problem. The fire was working exactly as designed. It simply was not enough. They did not evade the next strike. They redefined distance. As Council emitters climbed toward 80%, the human ship's drive curve changed, not in a burst, but in a smooth, deliberate rise. Acceleration climbed past 6G, then 9, then settled at a sustained 12, numbers that Council physiology tables flagged as lethal. Sensors recalibrated twice before accepting the data. The ship was not spiking thrust. It was holding it. 12G. At that acceleration, doctrine predicted crew failure, structural shear, loss of control. None appeared. Life signs remained steady at 1904. Hull integrity held. The human vessel closed from 20,500 kilometers to 16,000 in seconds. Vector precise, attitude unchanged. It did not jink or spiral. It advanced as if space itself were obliged to move aside. Then the rest of the system came alive. What the Council had dismissed as empty space populated with motion as additional human signatures emerged from long-range noise. Not a fleet massing in formation, but ships already distributed, 48, then 67, each entering acceleration along a different vector. Their movements were not synchronized, they were sequenced. Tiny offsets in timing, fractions, of a second apart, created paths that threaded through Council firing envelopes without overlap. The survey flotilla attempted to reform, elegant arcs tightening into defensive shells. Orders collided. One correction negated another. Fire control solutions lagged as targets refused to conform to predicted acceleration peaks. Human ships did not coast. They sustained. They're not running. Distance counters fell across the display. 14,000 kilometers, 11,500, 9,200. At those ranges, Council energy coherence degraded, beams spreading, reaction windows compressing below safe margins. Gunnery officers requested more time and were denied by physics. A Council cruiser broke formation to create space and found a human corvette already sliding through the corridor it needed, passing within 40 kilometers at relative velocity high, enough to strip sensor vanes and blind its after-rays. No shots were fired. The effect was immediate. The cruiser's escorts overcorrected to avoid collision, tearing a hole in the formation that 3 more human ships flowed through without. Slowing. This was not a charge. It was geometry executed under stress. Human acceleration profiles rose and fell with intent. One ship cut thrust at 5,000 kilometers, pivoted broadside, then resumed at 12 dring along a new vector, forcing 2 Council vessels to choose between collision or separation. They separated. Their mutual support died with the distance. At 6,000 kilometers, the human battleship bled velocity in a controlled burn that would have liquefied unconditioned crews. Inertial systems held. The ship rotated into firing alignment, weapons ports along its spine, irising open, dark and unapologetic. Around it, other human ships settled into positions that bracketed Council command vessels without firing a shot. Closing is a weapon. An elder surveyor finally understood the pattern too late. The humans were not collapsing the formation with fire. They were collapsing it with timing. Every sustained burn forced the Council to react. Reaction stacked error upon error. Space grew crowded. Choices vanished. At 3,500 kilometers, Council Command attempted a coordinated withdrawal. The vectors they needed were already occupied. Human ships held those lines calmly, acceleration steady, denying escape without pursuit. The Council's models broke first, then their formations. As the last distances stabilized inside optimal kinetic range, the human fleet stopped accelerating. They did not need to go faster. They had arrived exactly where they intended to be. Weapons remained silent for a heartbeat longer, as if allowing the lesson to finish teaching itself. The math resolved, and then the firing began. Human fire control did not sweep targets. It selected them. 3 Council command vessels sat inside 3,500 kilometers, their formations already warped by forced separation and conflicting vectors. Targeting solutions converged in silence. Probability bands narrowing until uncertainty fell below acceptable margins. Only then did the railguns speak. There was no warning flash. Only velocity. 8 tungsten slugs left the human battleships, spinal rails at precisely timed intervals, separated by 0.12 seconds to defeat predictive interception. Council sensors registered impacts before firing alerts could propagate. The first penetrator punched through a command cruiser's bow, ignored decorative superstructure, and exited through the primary coordination hub. The second followed the same channel, widening it. Internal pressure collapsed, power grids failed in sequence, not chaos. The ship broke apart along stress lines its designers had never tested. 1. Missiles launched from the flanks of human. Escorts, not in salvos, but in counted groups. 5 from one vector, 7 from another. Each carried distinct guidance logic. Loud decoys burned hot and obvious, drawing point defense fire and saturating tracking systems. The real warheads coasted cold, waking only in terminal approach. Council interceptors chased what they could see. The rest arrived untouched. A second command vessel attempted emergency thrust, trying to claw distance back towards 6,000 kilometers. It exposed its ventral plane in the maneuver. 3 railgun rounds arrived through that opening, followed by a 4th, delayed by milliseconds to exploit the sudden pressure differential. The gravity ring sheared free and continued spinning, intact and useless, while the ship itself collapsed inward. Life signs dropped from 8,211 to 0 in under 4 seconds. 2. Council captains shouted for retreat corridors. None existed. Human ships occupied the vectors they needed, holding position at sustained acceleration profiles that denied passage without pursuit. The third command vessel fired blindly, energy lances splashing across empty space as gunnery solutions lagged behind human motion. A human cruiser answered with a missile carrying a limited-yield nuclear charge. The detonation occurred at calculated standoff, shaped and directional. It did not vaporize the target. It crushed sensor arrays, fractured hull integrity, and collapsed internal compartments in a single controlled wave. The command vessel went dark, drifting, structure mostly intact, but systems dead. 3. The human fleet did not press the advantage blindly. Railgun fire paused for 1.7 seconds as targeting logic re-evaluated. Lesser council ships were ignored. Screens that no longer coordinated anything were allowed to live. Fire resumed only when a cruiser attempted to reassert command authority by broadcasting override codes. One slug removed the antenna cluster. The cruiser powered down moments later, surrender codes spilling across every channel. We count before we fire. The phrase appeared briefly on an auxiliary council display, origin flagged as human doctrinal artifact. No one had time to question it. At 2,000 kilometers, a cluster of council escorts attempted a desperate mass maneuver, trying to ram a human corvette to disrupt firing geometry. The corvette adjusted thrust by 0.4 G, slid aside, and let the escorts collide with one another. Human sensors logged the event as environmental hazard neutralization. No shots were fired. Missiles continued to arrive in measured numbers, not imsaturation. Selection. Each impact removed a ship that mattered. Ammunition counters updated in clean columns, railgun rounds fired 27, confirmed kills 11, command vessels eliminated 3, 1 disabled for capture. Nuclear charges expended 1. Human losses remained at 0 destroyed hulls. 2 ships reported superficial armor ablation. Crews remained operational. At 29 minutes, Council command coherence fell below 35%. Fleet-wide orders degraded into local guesses. Some captains fought on until their emitters overheated. Others powered down immediately, broadcasting surrender in overlapping frequencies. Human systems acknowledged each signal automatically, marking surrendered hulls green and excluding them from targeting solutions even when missiles were already inbound, peeling them away mid-course without hesitation. The firing stopped not with a final blow, but with a quiet certainty that nothing left needed killing. Human ships held position, weapons cold, geometry intact. The Council flotilla drifted in broken clusters, leaderless, stunned by how quickly superiority had been reduced to arithmetic. Across the void, the lesson settled with brutal clarity. This was not firepower. It was accounting, and the ledger had just been balanced. Silence followed by choice replaced the gunfire. At 29 minutes and 42 seconds, every human weapon system stood down in the same breath. Rail capacitors discharged into sinks, missile bays sealed. Across the shattered volume of space, Council crews waited for the next calculation and did not receive it. Instead, a transmission unfolded outward from the human battleship, riding every open channel, civilian and military alike, until it spilled beyond the system and into the wider relay web. The image was spare. A human officer, centered, posture unchanged from first contact. No insignia, no victory markers. "This engagement is paused," the officer said, voice level. "Compliance fire has ceased." Council officers braced for terms of eradication. None came. "We are broadcasting under interstellar law," the officer continued. "This message is addressed to all Council forces present, to client states, and to any polity monitoring this channel." Data panes opened. Beside the speaker, definitions, statutes, thresholds, clear, indexed. First, the practice of chattel slavery is prohibited. Effective immediately. Any vessel or installation engaged in the transport, processing, or ownership of sentient beings will be treated as a criminal enterprise. Across the Council flotilla, Internal alarms tripped as registries lit red. Cargo holds long normalized appeared on tactical overlays as liabilities. Processing queues froze. Second, the officer said, surrender is protected. Any ship that powers down offensive systems, transmits standard surrender codes, and holds position will not be fired upon. Boarding will be conducted only to secure weapons and render aid. Prisoners will not be harmed. We do not kill prisoners. The sentence propagated verbatim across channels. Human fire control enforced it in practice. Green markers multiplied as more council ships powered down, some slowly, some all at once. Targeting logic excluded them without exception, even when geometry favored easy destruction. Third, the officer said, there will be trials. The word carried weight without volume. Command authority does not exempt individuals from accountability. Evidence has been recorded. Jurisdiction will be asserted. Sentences will be imposed by courts, not fleets. A council legal attaché attempted to interrupt, citing sovereignty and ancient accords. The transmission did not pause. Sovereignty does not extend to enslavement, the officer replied. Accords that permit it are void. Numbers scrolled beneath the image, crisp and unavoidable. Estimated enslaved populations identified, 3.9 million. Vessels flagged for seizure, 286. Command personnel pending detention, 171. Humanitarian transfer window, 72 hours. Human ships began to move again, not toward targets, but toward survivors. Boarding craft launched in controlled numbers. Medics, visible, weapon safeties engaged. Damage control drones sealed ruptures on powerless hulls to prevent cascading failures. A human frigate altered course by 0.1 degrees to shield a surrendered cruiser from debris drift, sacrificing optimal position. Without comment, the officer concluded without flourish. You mistook restraint for weakness, they said. This is restraint. The transmission ended. In the quiet that followed, council crews confronted a reality no doctrine had prepared them for, the calm. Battle had stopped, not because humanity was finished, but because it had decided killing was no longer required, and that decision, enforced with the same precision as the firing that preceded it, made clear that the law had survived the war, and now intended to rule what came after. The realization spread sideways, not outward. Coalition observers had been monitoring the engagement from beyond declared council space, their sensors wide. Their analysts trained to notice what empires ignored. As the law broadcast propagated, they replayed the battle with different questions in mind. Not how the humans had won, but how they had endured. Human crews had sustained 12G acceleration for minutes at a time. Coalition physiology tables flagged. Unconsciousness at half that, fatal trauma shortly after. Yet, human life signs had remained flat. No spikes, no losses. Training logs surfaced from open human databases once dismissed as propaganda. Centrifuge conditioning measured in hours, not seconds. Skeletal reinforcement protocols. Cardiovascular adaptation beginning in adolescence. What had looked like recklessness was revealed as baseline. They were built for this, a coalition medic said quietly. The ships told the same story. Human hulls favored mass and redundancy over elegance, armor layered not just for protection, but for heat bleeding and structural sacrifice. Components were accessible, replaceable, designed to fail without killing the system. Coalition engineers overlaid the damage reports and found that the humans had expected every hit they took. Their ships had not survived by luck. They had survived by assumption. Deathworld standard. The phrase appeared in a cracked doctrine file recovered from an academic exchange centuries old. It described environments where gravity crushed, atmospheres poisoned, and ecosystems punished hesitation. Worlds where survival required constant adaptation, where safety margins were myths. Humanity had not escaped those worlds and softened. It had carried them forward. Coalition fleet historians compared timelines and found the deeper cut. Human forward depots predated first contact by generations. Training rotations assumed casualty rates that would have broken coalition militaries in peacetime. Logistics. Chains were optimized for isolation, not support. Fuel sources that could be refined from ice and rock, ammunition that could be machined anywhere. Crews trained to fight without resupply for months. They had planned for abandonment. One observer overlaid human expansion maps with Deathworld classifications and saw the pattern lock into place. Humanity did not avoid lethal systems. It settled them. It learned there. It trained there. The Empire's assumption that harsh worlds produced weak civilizations had been exactly backward. They don't fear attrition, a coalition tactician said. They were raised inside it. The battle's most unsettling metrics surfaced last. Human stress indicators during peak engagement had been lower than coalition baselines during routine patrols. The humans had not been improvising under fire. They had been executing drills, refined over centuries of living where failure meant extinction. As the coalition disseminated the analysis through encrypted channels, political models updated in real time, states that had relied on council protection recalculated their risk. Worlds once classified as marginal suddenly looked strategic if humanity chose to stand there. In the wreckage of the council flotilla, survivors wondered how a species from a lethal world could move with such calm. In coalition space, the answer was becoming unavoidable. Humanity had not adapted to war. War had adapted to humanity long ago. Neutralization followed doctrine, not emotion. Human command reclassified the remaining council vessels into 3 states: hostile, surrendered, undecided, and acted only on the first. The distinction was enforced by machine logic and human restraint in equal measure. Green-marked ships were excluded from firing solutions even when they drifted across optimal lanes. Red-marked ones were not warned again. Missile bays opened across the human lattice. This time there was no measured preamble. Waves launched in disciplined silence, hundreds of signatures blooming and fading as guidance systems shifted between hot burn and cold coast. The missiles did not converge on a single target cluster. They flowed through volume, dividing and recombining, filling corridors of Space Council doctrine had never treated as lethal simultaneously. Point defenses engaged reflexively and failed methodically. Interceptors chased decoys that burned bright and loud, while real warheads coasted dark, waking only in terminal seconds. At 7,000 kilometers, the first hostile cruiser died with engines firing, its hull split by kinetic impact and internal overpressure. At 6,300, another lost power and began to tumble. Surrender codes spilling seconds too late to cancel inbound fire already committed by logic gates that did not negotiate. Human systems logged the loss and adjusted nothing. The cascade accelerated. Council. Captains, cut off from coherent command, made decisions in isolation. Some powered down immediately, broadcasting surrender across every channel they could access. Human targeting acknowledged them within milliseconds, their hulls flipping from red to green as missiles peeled away mid-course, retargeting without hesitation. Others hesitated, hoping to be overlooked. They were not. Boarding operations followed behind the missile waves as a separate, slower geometry. Human cutters approached disabled ships at controlled relative velocities, grapples locking with mechanical certainty. Breach teams moved in pairs, weapons slung low, medics between them. They sealed bulkheads instead of blasting them. They vented compartments instead of charging through them. When resistance appeared, it was isolated and starved of options until it stopped. Do not fire on green. The directive pulsed across human channels continuously, enforced even when green-marked hulls drifted into perfect firing arcs against still hostile targets. Gunners adjusted, sacrificing efficiency to preserve principle. The choice slowed neutralization by minutes. No objections were raised. At 19 minutes into the second phase, a council carrier attempted a mass launch, dumping strike craft in a desperate effort to overwhelm point defenses. Human response was precise and impersonal. Point defense grids engaged not to annihilate but to shape. Kill cones herded the fighters into narrow volumes where electromagnetic pulses fired in timed bursts, frying guidance systems and power buses. Hundreds of craft went dead in space, pilots alive, instruments blind, recovery beacons activated. Automatically. Surrender cascade. The phenomenon appeared on coalition monitoring boards as a statistical inflection rather than a tactic. Once a critical mass of council ships powered down and survived intact, the remainder followed faster than any broadcast could compel. At 44 minutes, surrendered hulls outnumbered hostile ones 3-1. At 57, 6-1. The last organized swarm. Resistance formed around a crippled logistics tender. Heavy cruisers attempting to shield it with overlapping fields. Human analysis flagged the maneuver as emotionally driven. Missile fire softened the ring without saturation. Railgun shots punched precise holes through power cores and thruster assemblies. The tender was disabled without rupture. Boarding teams secured it and immediately began evacuating non-combatants, damage-control drones sealing ruptures to prevent atmosphere loss. Throughout the phase, the human battleship held central position, anchoring the geometry. Its railguns fired sparingly now, each shot deliberate, removing vessels that threatened to destabilize the surrender perimeter. Ammunition tallies updated in clean columns, missiles expended 327, railgun rounds 21 additional, nuclear charges 0 in this phase. Human losses remained unchanged. At 73 minutes, the final hostile marker flipped to green. The battle space did not erupt in cheers or declarations. It simply went quiet. Hundreds of council hulls drifted in ordered clusters, weapons cold, crews waiting. Human ships moved among them like custodians, dispatching repair drones, establishing traffic lanes, preventing collisions that would have killed crews who had already surrendered. Prisoner counts stabilized at 3.7 million. Injured treated reached 418,000. Fatalities ceased entirely once the last red marker disappeared. An Imperial officer aboard a surrendered cruiser watched a human frigate adjust thrust by 0.2 degrees to avoid debris that might strike their powerless hull and felt something unfamiliar settle in their chest. Not relief, not fear, recognition. The Council fleet had not been destroyed. It had been dismantled, choice by choice, vector by vector, until fighting no longer made sense. Human command logged the phase complete and shifted focus to humanitarian transfer and legal processing. Violence ended not with exhaustion, but with intent. Mercy moved with the same precision as fire. Human cutters docked with surrendered hulls, according to a queue that ignored rank and favored need. Atmospheres were stabilized first, then gravity, then medical access. Injured council crew were triaged without comment, species tags flashing briefly before disappearing into a unified priority schema. Pain control followed. Bleeding stopped. Splints locked. The process was fast, practiced, and conspicuously indifferent to uniforms. No reprisals. The directive propagated with the same authority as a firing order. Marines escorted prisoners with weapons slung low, restraints applied only where resistance had already occurred. Those who complied walked unbound. Those who did not were isolated, recorded, and transferred without spectacle. Every interaction generated data, biometrics, testimony, command lineage, fed into a legal system already active and waiting. Temporary detention habitats unfolded from cargo holds, modular and sterile. Food met dietary requirements calculated to trace elements. Translators rendered instructions in calm, neutral tones. Prisoner counts stabilized at 3.7 million. Fatalities did not increase. The numbers mattered, and the humans treated them like commitments rather than estimates. Across the system, civilian traffic resumed under human advisories. Relief convoys arrived along pre-cleared vectors, bearing insignia from worlds that had never publicly aligned with Earth. Coalition observers watched the manifests populate and recognized the pattern. Neighboring systems were not waiting for invitations, they were filing declarations, suspension of council tribute, opening of ports to human oversight, requests for arbitration under the statutes broadcast hours earlier. Political gravity shifted not with speeches but with filings. The council's authority bled away through paperwork faster than it ever had through force. We choose this law. The line appeared in multiple declarations, identical phrasing traced back to the law broadcast template. Analysts flagged it as mimetic adoption. Human Command did not comment. Trials were scheduled before the last boarding action completed. Jurisdiction packets listed charges with unemotional clarity. Enslavement, unlawful processing, command responsibility. Evidence hashes linked sensor logs to testimony collected in real time. Command personnel flagged earlier were separated and transferred under guard that neither tightened when they struggled nor softened when they pleaded. The guards had heard both before. A council governor attempted to negotiate amnesty in exchange for political realignment. The response came from a human legal officer, not a commander. Alignment does not erase crimes, they said. The channel closed. In the detention habitats, rumors spread faster than fear. Crews compared treatment. They noticed that surrender had worked exactly as promised. They noticed that no one had been spaced, no compartments flooded, no reprisals taken for insults, shouted in panic. The lesson settled unevenly, but permanently. At 96 hours, the first liberated populations were transferred off seized vessels. Families emerged into gravity they had not chosen, blinking under lights calibrated for comfort rather than efficiency. Human medics stood aside as civilian agencies took over, their role complete. The human battleship remained on station, scarred, armor patched with clean plates that did not hide the damage. Its commander filed a final operational note. Force applied, compliance achieved, mercy sustained. In distant systems, leaders weighed the cost of defiance against the evidence flowing through every relay. The choice was no longer abstract. Humanity had not seized territory. It had offered an order and shown, with meticulous restraint, what happened when that order was refused. The quiet that followed felt provisional. Debris fields settled into predictable orbits. Traffic lanes reopened under human advisories. Trial, schedules propagated through secure channels with the same priority once reserved for firing solutions. From a distance, the system looked orderly again, as if violence had been a brief correction rather than a defining event. Human sensors did not relax. Deep-range arrays continued to sweep beyond the heliopause. Baselines stretched across millions of kilometers, listening for patterns that did not belong. At 118 hours post-engagement, one array returned a contact that refused clean classification. The signature was faint, persistent, and wrong. Not a fleet, not a probe. A pressure in space-time that suggested movement without conventional drives. Analysts rerun the data. The anomaly held. The source lay beyond the outer rim at a distance exceeding 40,000 AU, approaching along a vector that ignored established corridors and jump geometry. Mass estimates fluctuated wildly, as if the object disagreed with being measured. Emission profiles matched fragments buried in pre-council archives. Records of civilizations erased so completely their names survived only as warnings. An exterminator signature. Human Command convened without ceremony. No alarms echoed through the fleet. No broadcasts interrupted relief operations. The information was compartmentalized, routed to planning cells that had existed long before this encounter. Contingency headers unlocked. Timelines populated. The numbers were not comforting, but they were familiar. A coalition observer, cleared under emergency protocols, asked a single question over a secure channel. Is this connected to what just happened? The human response came after a brief pause. It is adjacent, they said, not causal, meaning it would have come regardless, meaning the council had never been the final problem. The human battleship adjusted station by 0.3 degrees, aligning its long-range sensors with the approaching anomaly. Around it, other human ships mirrored the motion without instruction. Geometry settling into a configuration older than the Council's oldest charts. Ammunition tallies updated. Training rotations shifted. Messages went out to systems that had not yet chosen a side, carrying no threats, only data. Beyond the rim, something ancient continued inward, indifferent to law, mercy, or surrender. Humanity watched it approach with the same calm it had shown an empire, and began doing the math. Again.